All right, and we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to talk about something that is a couple things I was reading last night regarding the Steelers quarterback controversy, if you want to call it that. So I saw that players are really advocating for Mason Rudolph to be the starter. Now he's going to be a free agent, and it seems like the Steelers are going to. The other thing I saw, too, is, at least from what I was reading, the Steelers are not looking to sign a veteran quarterback to start over Kenny Pickett for the upcoming season. The team wants to give Pickett another season to establish himself as the long-term starter and avoid creating a quarterback controversy. Well, the players seem to be doing that because they want Mason Rudolph. Now, before I get into that, so we have Carmen in the chat asking, who are we talking about? Well, we were just talking about Dak Prescott, the Cowboys, a couple of suggestions that Micah Parsons had as to what the Cowboys should do in the offseason. And then he said, talk about the Chiefs. Well, here's the thing. I talked about the Chiefs for 2 weeks and, leading up to the Super Bowl. So, well, actually I did. I talked about Chris Jones actually today. So I still talked about the Chiefs. So, and listen, they're going to be a topic and they're going to be a team that we will talk about at times during the offseason, looking at receivers maybe they try to add, whether it's through the draft, free agency, and the Chris Jones situation. So that'll continue to be a thing. But it's not going to be the main topic just because, there's some other teams out there that we can also talk about. And listen, if you want to go back, but they won the Super Bowl. Yeah, they did. They did. And believe me, we talked about that all week last week. So if you want to go back and watch those shows, you could definitely go and do that because I greatly appreciate that. Talked about the Chiefs a lot, but there's only so much stuff you could talk about. I mean, I talked about the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl a lot last week. Mahomes' legacy, Andy Reid's legacy, all of that, the GOAT discussion. There's plenty of past videos where I talk about the Chiefs. So I recommend that you go and do that. So, now let's get into this. So, yeah, when Mason Rudolph took over for Kenny Pickett, took over for Mitchell Trubisky, who actually the Steelers released, which was the right move, in my opinion. Towards the end of the season, Pickett was still hurt, but then he was healthy enough to play, and the Steelers just were like, hey, listen, we're going to ride the Mason Rudolph momentum into the playoffs. Now, again, they were 1-and-done, but still, I think that was the right move. So, yeah, led the Steelers to a 3-0 record the final 3 weeks of the regular season. They clinched the playoff spot. But, yeah, we'll see what ends up happening. So, yeah, Rudolph is set to become a free agent, but the Steelers have expressed their intention to prioritize re-signing him, according to head coach Mike Tomlin and team president Art Rooney II. Retaining Rudolph will give the Steelers the opportunity to have him compete with Pickett for the starting job in the upcoming season. So is that the veteran quarterback that they're going to bring Mason Rudolph back? I don't know. See, now this is another team like the Cowboys where they're probably, again, they're going to be in that same situation again next year. Now, again, I feel like Kenny Pickett's kind of been getting disrespected a little bit just because I know he wasn't spectacular, but the Steelers were winning games before he got hurt. But then he gets hurt, and that's when everything fell apart. And Mitchell Trubisky was playing, and he just was not playing well. And they made the smart move, putting in Mason. Well, again, I didn't know if it was going to be the smart move, but they put Mason Rudolph in, played well against the Bengals. They won a tough game in Seattle. And then, in bad weather against the Ravens, albeit against their backups, they won that game. And they made the playoffs. And listen, they made the game interesting against the Bills. At one point, it was a one-score game, but you got to give Mason Rudolph credit. He stepped in, didn't think he was going to get another shot, and he did. And Steelers made the playoffs, but again, didn't really amount to anything. I think we all kind of figured that the Steelers were not going to win against the Bills, and yeah. It's just the Steelers they got a QB problem. And they want to give Kenny Pickett another shot. But, yeah, I don't know. You look at now, we talked about the Cowboys with the NFC. Look at the Steelers in the AFC. I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks that you would rank over Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett's probably ranked more towards the bottom than he is the top. I mean, you look at the quarterbacks in your own division. I mean, a healthy Deshaun Watson is ranked over you. And then, of course, you got Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. And then you also look at, the other divisions as well. I mean, Anthony Richardson comes back healthy. C.J. Stroud, Trevor Lawrence. Will Levis, again, had a great debut. But after that, it was kind of hit or miss with him. Who else am I missing? So then, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen. It's just there's a lot of Kenny Pickett's ranked more towards the the bottom half of the teams. You got to have an elite quarterback. And you saw that in the Super Bowl. I mean, listen, Brock Purdy had a great season, but what was the difference in the game? Other than the 49ers' mistakes, it's the quarterback, and that's, again, not to discredit Brock Purdy, but listen, Patrick Mahomes is an all-time great, elite quarterback. You got to have that. And again, the Chiefs' offense wasn't great this year, but you know what? They have him. They got Travis Kelce, Andy Reid. They had those guys, and that ultimately was also the Chiefs' defense too was a big factor as to why they got back to the Super Bowl as well. But you got to have an elite quarterback, and the Steelers, they, like Kenny Pickett, I don't think is bad, but I don't think he's going to be somebody that's going to elevate the Steelers to the promised land. As much as I don't want to say that because we have the same name, not the exact same name, but the same first name. But Brock is a pretty good quarterback. He is. But is he great? No, he's not great. But he's good. He's solid. But and with the Steelers, they're kind of going to be in the same situation next year. I mean, I think they're just going to kind of be. They'll have a decent record, but ultimately they'll get to the playoffs, and I don't really expect them to. If they get to the playoffs, I don't really expect them to go past the first round because, again, it's just there's a lot of teams out there that are better than the Steelers. Now, they have one of the best defensive players in the league in T.J. Watt, who's the quarterback of their defense. But I mean, you gotta have an elite offense. And the Steelers we're inconsistent on offense. The offense was frustrating last year. I mean, you had, again, everybody calling for Matt Canada's job, and eventually they did that. It ended up not really going anywhere. But you got to credit Mason Rudolph for at least getting them to the playoffs. But again, I mean, for Steelers fans that kind of been begging for them to get past the first round, win a playoff game, because they have not won a playoff game again since 2016. That was a long time ago. And it looked like possibly this could have been the year where they said, all right, we're going to move off of Mike Tomlin. And they, they're not going to do that because they ended up making the playoffs. But I don't know. I feel like if they're going to opt to just bring back Mason Rudolph and just have him and Kenny Pickett compete for the starting job, I don't think is the right thing. Because you have some veteran quarterbacks out there that are upgrades. If Kirk Cousins bounces back from the Achilles injury, I think he's a good option. Russell Wilson, if he gets released, maybe you bring him in. Ryan Tannehill. I mean, again, options aren't great, but they could be upgrades. It's just, with what they got right now, I don't know. I don't know. Also, in the comments, Kenny should not start. Yeah, I mean, again, though, before he got hurt, the Steelers were winning games. And it's just once he got hurt, then the wheels just fell off. And then that's when they made the change from Trubisky to Mason Rudolph, and they made the playoffs. So I think Kenny Pickett does deserve another shot. But, I think bringing in competition, would be a good thing for him. But, if Mason Rudolph is the only competition you're bringing in, well, I don't know about that. And again, Kenny Pickett was healthy enough to play. They just did not want to go to him. They just rode with Mason Rudolph. So, yeah, I don't know. This is another thing to keep an eye on as well. I know that also the thing we talked about this. Justin Fields maybe being a possibility if they traded for him. We'll see, but it doesn't look like that. But again, with the players, some players advocating for Mason Rudolph. That's you don't want that because that could divide up the locker room. You also saw and I thought about this too. You go back to the Zach Wilson, Mike White situation. You had Jets players wearing Mike White T-shirts. That whole situation was a mess. You don't want to have that, But again, Steelers made the playoffs because they made the quarterback change, and they put in Mason Rudolph. So yeah, I can understand why the players are saying, hey, let's keep riding it with Mason, but we'll see. Again, we got a whole off season, but again, this is another thing to kind of keep an eye on. Because listen, you drafted Kenny Pickett, and he gets hurt. Mason Rudolph, wins those final 3 games. You make the playoffs. Yeah, first they got to bring back Mason Rudolph. Then we'll talk about them two battling it out for the starting quarterback job. So we'll see. But that's pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, we'll be back again tomorrow, same time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. As always, make sure to look out for the shorts that I will release later today. As always, and then I will work on getting the four parts, break down the show into 4 parts. So if you missed anything, you could just go back and watch the segments of the show. And make sure to look at all the other past shows as well, not just from my show, but from the other podcasts here on the GSMC Sports Network. But so with that is all the time that we have for today. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow. And until then, I am Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.